business, item number 4, adoption of the FY 2016 operating and capital budget ordinance and the associated tax rates and fees. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize he was.
I'm sorry, I was in the way, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Chairman and Commissioners, this is your 12th public discussion on the fiscal year 15-16 proposed budget. You had a public hearing on May 18th on the county operations, VFD, and EMS portion of the budget, at which point in time you provided tentative approval of that budget. And then you had your statutorily held public hearing on the county budget, including Union County Public Schools, on June 15th. We do not have a presentation this evening, as we have conducted 2 public hearings on the budget, one that is statutorily required. And at this point in time, I would turn it over to the board for discussion and direction to staff.
Okay, if we delay 1 moment till
Certainly.
Mr. Simpson comes back.
Mr. Chairman, may I be excused
Yes,
to
sir.
check for a second?
Okay, we'll continue. Commissioner Simpson, while you were out, the manager described briefings that we've conducted on this and went into detail on that for your information. What we have on the table is the manager's recommended budget. It is a very complex, very thought-out budget, taking into consideration requests from departments within the county, the school system, EMS, and the fire departments. I'll have to say that Mr. Yates and the manager did an exceptional job of covering the details and looking at it, and my recommendation is that we adopt it as presented, but we will go have comments from my peers here, so anyone that would like to make their comments on the budget and for further discussion.
I have a concern with the current budget, and what I've asked staff to do over and over again is to see where we can find additional savings in order to prevent a tax increase this year. I don't believe that we need to have a tax increase of that amount this year. I believe there's additional savings that can be found. So whether that means with additional discussions or negotiations, at this point, I'm open to suggestions on where, if any, savings can be found.
Question, please. Would you anticipate a neutral budget that's neutral to tax increases? In other words, there'll be no tax increases? Is that what you're saying, or a moderate tax increase?
My
Right.
preference would be no tax increase at all.
Right now, we're looking at 1.41 cents.
1.41.
Okay.
I'm open to a compromise. I'm just concerned that there's additional savings that can be found.
Okay.
I
Commissioner
agree with
Akins?
Commissioner Simpson. I will not support a tax increase, and I believe we'll just have to find the money somewhere.
Okay. Commissioner Simpson, would you like to share your thoughts?
Well, I won't say awoken this morning because I was awake long before the local news came on. But I got to see the broadcast of how we would be meeting this evening, and it would be a tax increase. I sort of make the analogy, you know, I'm a farm boy, and I make the analogy to cattle. Many times farmers love to flaunt their paycheck that they receive for cattle at the sale about how many dollars per pound they got for a calf. The problem is the calf may only weigh a couple of 100 pounds, so he got $1.50 a pound. So that sounds like he really did something with $1.50 a pound. The fact of the matter is, if he'd have kept the calf till he got to be 500 and he just got $1 for him, he'd have got a whole lot more money. So we go back and forth with the tax rate versus tax revenue. And I talked to Mr. Yates several times about this with regard to, is this a revenue neutral budget? And I think in his presentation, he showed us many times that and certainly not everybody's the same, but on a $200,000 home and a average automobile that most taxpayers were going to save 30 or 40 bucks. Is that right, Mr. Yates? So I get real heartburn when we talk about tax rate the tax rate being an increase in a reval year, being a tax increase. Now, that being said, we know how easy it is to take that tax rate, and when the economy turns around and these values come back and the property values increase, that tax rate never seems to go down. So that's a real concern of mine, particularly in looking at one of the slides that was presented with regard to the county schools' current expense from 2015 to 21. If we stay at the same rate from 45.50 to 52.54, 7 pennies in about 6 years is what is projected. Is that right, Mr. Yates? Did I not see that slide that said from 2015 to 2021?
From last year's budget?
We were going from 45.50 to 52.54.
If you continue on the same trajectory that legislation had you on before it was gone.
Yes, and
That's
I'm
the
talking
same.
about a trajectory, exactly. Okay.
Sans correction.
Since the 13-14 budget, I believe Ms. Cotto told me that if you include the numbers for this year's budget, $54 million in capital for schools.
That is correct.
I don't know how many more years it'll take. It'll be quite a few years, I hope. I get to wear the badge for the 15.4% tax increase. Had people talk about my vote to increase that taxes on Union County taxpayers that much. I think we talked about this over and over about how in previous boards, as we wandered through that extreme growth period, we kept that tax rate low. And I did many a presentation. We actually hired a consultant from the University of Georgia that came and did the study on cost of services and the fact that of how much residential cost in terms of how much it costs versus how much it brings in terms of revenue. So the point being, the other point I want to make is I have a lot of heartburn about a tax increase. And I'm going to vote my conscience, regardless of how the other four of these gentlemen, but the other point I want to make is that I served as a department head in this county and was privy to the budget process each year during many of those years when the schools got it all and we had to sacrifice. So I'm in a real conundrum from the standpoint of I don't want to support a tax increase. I would prefer to vote for the same rate that we had last year. On the other hand, I'm not going to get into a situation where we have to start taking money away from county programs. I think we've made those sacrifices, and I think Ms. Cotto and her staff have worked long and hard to put us on a 5-6 year sustainable projection with that similar tax rate each year, providing those services to our citizens. So that's sort of where I stand.
Vice Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Never thought I would say this, but I almost longed for the first time I was in office when we had revals that were property values skyrocketing and revenue flowing in, and our argument was not how much to raise it, but how much to cut it, and if we was cutting it enough or not. And that was a very, very good station to be in at that time, other than the other things. Jeff, how much revenue with the tax rate that is proposed bring in versus last year?
Are you referring to on the county side, or are you referring to the total?
Total budget.
The total revenue across all funds are across the 3 tax rates. Brings in a total of about 3.4 million.
So 3.4 million less or more?
More.
Okay.
That deals with the changes in the main thing, that's the ad valorem on the vehicles, because that's not part of your revenue neutral calculation.
So at revenue neutral, we would need to cut 3.4 million?
Right, to roll it back to rate neutral, which you're already well below revenue neutral. To come back to what we referred to early on as rate neutral, meaning the same rate as last year, you would need to continue to cut down about 3.5 million, right around that neighborhood, 3.2 to 3.5.
So what's the revenue neutral number? If we were to maintain our same revenue, do the revenue neutral number, what would that number be?
It's the 3.5.
No, I mean total rate.
We are already below revenue neutral.
No,
So-
I know, but I want to know, is it
He wants to
80
know the
cents,
tax
is it
rate.
79 cents, is it,
Oh, the tax rate?
right?
The tax rate you'd be at would be right 76.14 to be rate neutral. Are you talking about the?
Revenue neutral.
You're already below.
Okay,
revenue
but,
neutral.
okay, we started this process out at 84 cents.
Right.
And we've whittled down and whittled down and whittled down to now that we're at 70, it's a little over 77 cents. Where's the number, how far under revenue neutral rate are we? Like, when you look at if would we be at 80 cents, 79 cents, 78 cents? Where's that number?
Give me a second, I'll tell you.
And while he's doing that, I'll say this, I was here last year and, watching some of the meetings as a candidate, and, what the three of you gentlemen that are still on the board did last year, I know you caught a lot of grief over it, but it was something that, that had to be done. It was mandated by legislation, and you did it to, you did it to keep the county whole and keep us going where we needed to go. You did catch a lot of grief over it, and I don't think all of it was deserved. I think that you guys took a step forward, and you did things that past boards, including my board, we had tax increases during my board. I never voted for one. I don't think I ever voted for a budget, but it was a different situation back then than it is now. And when you lose values, it really is this is completely different than what I remember, and this budget process has been better than what I remember. What did that number come up with?
Based on the state calculation and how we calculate revenue neutral, your tax rate would be 81 cents,
81 cents.
80.94.
And the manager's proposal is 77.
The manager's proposal is 77.65.
And may I ask, about 60% of our constituents are seeing a decrease. I know personally I am. And along with some of my neighbors out there, they're seeing a reduction even with the 1.41. We'll still see a reduction. And I think that's what you're trying to point out.
The way that it worked out, 69% of the residential properties saw a reduction, 55% of the commercial properties saw a reduction, and 65% of the industrial and 91% of the agricultural. Basically what that would tell us is that even at rate neutral, 31% of those folks are going to see a tax bill increase. So on the flip side of that equation, those are the only folks that saw any kind of increase in their values. So even at revenue neutral, those folks should see a relatively flat bill, and we're below that.
By about 4 cents, right?
So excuse me.
Go ahead. Vice
So
Chair.
we're looking at a majority of the Union County taxpayers are going to see a tax cut.
Correct. The average homeowner, which is, as Commissioner Simpson mentioned, when we look at a $200,000 house, that's about average in the county. Obviously, there's high and low, but that $200,000 house, as we had talked about, given an average car, we'll see about a $36 decrease in their total tax bill. Now, granted, that's average car, and it's a lot of averages in that equation, and nobody's exactly average. But the vast majority of folks in the county will see that as a bill reduction. All right, and in this case, a real tax bill reduction.
So a person would have to have a pretty significant increase in the value of their property before they saw a increase at the 77. They would get an idea of like if you went up 20,000, 30,000.
To see, so it would take a few minutes to calculate that.
That's
But the average homeowner in Union County, from top to bottom across the county, is right around that $200,000 number. In some parts of the county, that's skewed because we have highs and lows. We don't throw out the highs and lows. That's just literally the median. So, the folks that are on the high end of that absolutely may see a little bit more. The folks that are on the lower end of that will see a greater savings. Everybody below that 200 will see more. Everybody above that will see a declining savings up to whatever point that break even is.
I think that with that being said, what we're looking at is that the person that's value went up on their home, even if we stayed rate neutral at 76, they're going to see an increase in their taxes.
Right. The folks that saw increases in their value, even at rate neutral, will see an increase in their tax bill. No matter what, if you keep it at rate neutral, even to the extent if you lowered it below rate neutral, until you reach that median point or that break-even point with them, you wouldn't be able to catch them up. But what we can see is that's only 31% of the residential property in the county that had that experience. The vast majority saw it the other way, and it went down the other way. So their number creeps up as far as value to the point where that breaks even. That makes sense.
You know, the thing in the paper, like Jerry was getting to, in the paper in the morning, it's gonna be commissioners increase taxes. It's not gonna be that most citizens see a tax cut, so everybody will panic until they see their tax bill next year. You know, the way I see it, if we can get a tax cut for over a majority of the taxpayers in Union County, I think that you have done a lot of hard work. I think that the manager's done a lot of hard work on this, and at this point in time, I'm willing to support the manager's recommended budget.
Commissioner Simpson.
I still go back and I'm struggling with this, and I know we've gone back and forth several times. And where I struggle is when we keep talking about revenue neutral and whether or not the vast majority sees an increase or a decrease. That's just, to me, that's the problem we're having right now is if everything's based on revenue neutral, then everybody's trying to spend whatever that revenue neutral number is. And I'm not saying that the county's doing that this year, but that to me is the inherent problem with government, is that you always spend what you know you're going to get, and you always try and hit that number so you don't have to save taxes. And to Commissioner Simpson's point, they did an increase last year, and my understanding was as a result of that increase, we would not have to do one this year. So my hat's off to them last year. They did what needed to be done with the understanding, my belief is that we would not need one this year. We had that rate smoothing effect. And yet we're back at it this year. So when it comes to next year and we have excess revenues, are we going to be doing a tax decrease, or are we going to say because we're revenue neutral that now we can go back and we can spend more money? And to me, that is the struggle. And I know you do zero budgeting, and I know you've looked at it, but my struggle is I'm looking at the growth in the county versus what's happening to the taxpayer. And it's great if 66% of the county is getting a tax decrease, but if you're that 33% that isn't, that's not a good thing. So it's great if a majority is saving, but if some people aren't and we have room to save others, then I guess that's the struggle that I'm running into. And I really wish we'd had an opportunity to sit down with the schools, because they're such a big piece of this budget that I would have liked to have asked them some questions that I can't ask them, because I can't see where there's additional savings. I can't ask what their rationale is on certain things. And yet we're raising taxes again for them. And that's a battle that I'm really struggling with, because I want to do what's right for the schools. I want to take care of the kids. I want to take care of the students. I want to take care of the people in the county. But I can't ask everyone questions. I can ask you questions. I can ask Ms. Cotto questions. But I can't ask the schools the questions, because we weren't able to work out a time, a date, whatever it may be. But that's my concern. And I think everybody looks at it as, well, if we set this rate, that's what we have, that's revenue neutral. But there's still people in this county that are going to pay more, and they're not getting any more out of it. And that's my struggle. I think there's additional savings.
Commissioner Simpson.
Can I ask Commissioner Simpson a question?
Yes, sir.
Back in December, weren't you named as a liaison to the school board?
I was.
Did you not have the opportunity to meet with their liaisons?
I did. I met with their liaisons, and unfortunately, the first question they asked me was what the impact was of the revow. And I believe both individuals served on their finance committee, and I was disappointed that they didn't know what the impact was. And unfortunately, because of some conditions, we weren't able to meet at the scheduled time. And I understand that, but I was hoping that we could meet at a later date, because again, this is a huge part of the budget. I have questions, I have concerns. I think there's room for an adjustment both on the county side and on the school side, and still be able to meet everyone's needs.
I think Commissioner Jerry Simpson had an excellent point, because I have observed how the county side, the county employees took a back seat over years. And even though, we've got an increase for our county employees, very calculated increase, that I think our employees I think they deserve that increase, so we can continue. The deputies here, I know that we have made a commitment to you in the past, and we need to honor that and also look at our increases. I'm also a realtor, and I can tell you the 31%, their increase going up is because the value of their homes went up. And when the value of your home goes up, you have the capability of selling. What took the biggest hit, especially in parts of the county, is the value of land. Because in the previous reval, land was very highly thought of by the county, put it that way. Because I know I have several acres, and I think it was appraised at like $80,000 an acre, which was exorbitant. And that's come back into a more realistic point. But I understand your concern for the 31%, and I think that's very valid, but there are also, most of those individuals have realized a gain in the value of their property. And like Jeff said earlier, if you left it at the 76, they'd still see a tax increase. I think I continue to say that I think the manager and her staff have done a very diligent job at looking at what options we have. They've evaluated all aspects for all parties and schools and departments and come up with a realistic budget in a reval year that's been very difficult. Like Commissioner Rushing said, it's just the opposite of what you experience most of the time. It's very difficult. Is there any other comments? Or do we need to take a vote on the motion and see where we are?
Just one more.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Yates, in the county budget, we're looking at, to stay at the rate we are now, $3.5 million, close to it. Where are the three largest places where we can cut to find that money?
If you go back to, remember, we have a slide we've looked at quite a few times called the distribution of ad valorem tax. It tells you where the ad valorem tax goes. So I can tell you, you're looking at 30.64 cents, or in this case, the 28.82. 10.88 cents of that goes to the sheriff's department. 3.38 cents of that goes to school's debt, which I can't let you not cover the school's debt. So 7.8 cents goes to human services. 3.23% goes to your libraries, parks, soil and water conservation, ag center, those your cooperative extension program. A little over half a penny goes to the Board of Elections. A little over half a penny goes to administrative services. You have just under a third of a penny that goes to the community partners, which includes all of your outside agencies we work with that do provide services to the community. Right at one hundredth of a penny goes to central admin, the general government services, which involves legal, tax collections, all those other pieces. So you're really in the boat that the biggest users of your tax rate between the school's debt, human services, and the sheriff's department, that's over half of what your tax rate goes to fund. So I think when you talk about where those big services are, you're gonna have to give us some guidance on what you want to not do as a commission, because I think commissioners all put it very aptly, you don't want to balance the budget on the backs of the employees. So to take a broadsword and cut employee pay raises, I don't think it's fair to the employees. I think that if you're going to do it, we need to take a very precise approach.
You may not think it's fair, but what is the cost of that?
Employee pay raises is about $1.2 million in your budget for this year, and your sheriff adjustments are probably around $600,000.
So we're not halfway.
No.
Right.
Again, I don't think there's any interest on this board of cutting sheriff's pay raises or I don't think that, and, you know, our employees did go without for a long time. We're seeing a tax cut. The majority of the taxpayers, even if we kept the rate the same, the people who are going to see a tax increase are going to see a tax increase. Again, do you feel like your budget's sustainable?
I believe it absolutely is sustainable. We've modeled the county side at the 2882. Now, that doesn't speak for the EMS fire piece because the jury's still out, or the committee's still working through that aspect of it. And that doesn't also control them for what the school side of it is. But as far as the county side, we're within our tolerance levels looking into the future and in discussions with the manager. I think she's made the commitment to you, and I support that commitment, that we are able to live within the 2882 that we've recommended to you for the foreseeable future.
And as I stated last year to the Board of County Commissioners, and I will state again this year to the Board of County Commissioners, I believe that's sustainable for at least 5 years, with a couple caveats. If you have a reval in those 5 years, that's a different story. Or if you all take on additional programs, projects, or you have any capital improvement programs that are approved by the voters, could change that. But otherwise, with your existing operations, I feel is sustainable for a 5-year period of time.
And does that include the EMS and fire commission?
No, but it does not, because within the EMS contract, we negotiate that each year with them as to what their budget is. The biggest increase was this year because of the number of personnel that they had to add based upon the improved response times and the additional response vehicles that are going to be on the road. So there was a significant increase this year. The hope is that in subsequent years, you will not see that much of an increase. As it relates to the VFDs, that is conditioned upon what the working group develops and bring back to this board for consideration and what you adopt.
And so the likelihood of an increase again next year as a result of those two items?
I'm pretty confident with EMS, barring what I know today, that I don't know that would be what would change the parameters. Depending upon what comes out of your committee, if there's a recommendation that the structure is different than what it is today, then I would say yes, you could be seeing an increase for those public safety services next year.
But I also say that there is opportunity for savings in there. This board has taken action to improve the health and safety of the citizens of Union County kind of dramatically. The EMS was identified as needing attention, and that was addressed, and we had a basic improvement. I think there's opportunity to manage that expense. The committee with the volunteer fire departments are currently working on that right now. That's fire service, the fire taxes that the county is accustomed to. But I think what I heard Jeff describing a while ago is that we've got a budget that's dedicated to public safety and the health of our citizens. Do we have any further discussion? There again, I would make a motion that we adopt the FY 2016 operating capital budget orders and associated tax rates and fees as the managers recommended. Any further discussion? Can I have a vote on that, please? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Vote passes 3-2.
Thank you very much.
Next is our county manager's comments.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
while we're on this topic of the budget, could I
Yes, sir.
could I offer a motion? Mr. Yates was just talking about the distribution of ad valorem. In light of, I see in the media where we're wrangling. We're wrangling over the fire department budget. So I know that's going to be a big issue in the next year. In light of that, would it be possible, or my motion is that we break that out separately and identify that to the public as a, I believe now it's emergency services.
What we have split right now is EMS / volunteer fire departments. So we have combined those two. So you now have a trifurcated tax rate where you have county services, public schools, and then volunteer fire departments and emergency medical services combined.
So what's after trifurcated?
I'm not going to even attempt to say what the word might be, but
My motion is to make it whatever that is and break the volunteer fire departments out, or the fire departments.
that part of the
Let me be clear
budget?
about what
Yeah,
your
we need-
motion
yeah.
is, because I'll have to make Van crazy with this tomorrow. You're wanting essentially 4 tax rates that are on the county-wide version. You're wanting the county tax rate, which we have, the school's tax rate, which we have, where we had a third tax rate of a fire / EMS countywide tax rate. You want to see EMS and then fire broken out in 2 separate rates. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's my motion, yes, sir.
Commissioner Simpson, don't we have somewhat, this fire EMS tax is actually, majority of it's EMS, is that correct? And then there is the what comes out of the general fund that we help additionally fund the fire tax, fire fee structure that we have today.
what you will see on the tax bill with the commissioner's motion is you'll see the county services, you would see the Union County Public Schools, you would see emergency medical services, you would see volunteer fire departments, which is the county supplement only. And then if you had a fire fee or a fire tax, which all of us would within Union County, one or the other, you would see that rate as well.
We have that today. I have no problem with that.
Commissioner Simpson, I wasn't clear. Was that for this year's budget or for next budget year?
I would have to maybe leave that up to the judgment of the manager and the tax office in that regard. This year, we froze the budget, so that should be relatively understood, correct?
I certainly don't want to speak for tax administration, but I would think we have the numbers and they should be able to break it out.
Primarily interested in after the outcome of our committee.
Okay, now I'm confused and I apologize.
My point being is
So for the
not-
fiscal year 16, is that something you're
I don't see
wanting?
it's necessary this year, next year, once that has been decided, is my point.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
yes, sir.
Commissioner Rushing.
And, you know, you probably, if we approved your budget, and your budget already had it split out for fire and EMS, fire / EMS. So, you know, we already approved having it split out. We just didn't have it approved splitting fire from EMS. So you want to just wait till next year to do that and withdraw
I
the
think that's
motion?
what he just said.
You see what I'm saying?
No,
You don't want to withdraw the motion?
no.
Okay, so we're going to
If
split
it's
out this.
necessary to do it this year to maintain the motion, then we'll do it this year.
If you'll give me just a couple of seconds, I'll give you the rates, and then
Because actually it will amend your budget ordinance, that we will need for you to adopt the amendment to the budget ordinance since it's right now combined.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, you caught me a little off guard. But
That's government making things difficult.
So the rate, it looks like the rate for fire, the VFD, countywide VFD funding is .478 cents, so it'd be .0047. And then the rate for EMS would be .0263. Which you combine together is the 3.11.
Give me those again, please.
It is .0047, I'm sorry, 48. We have to round up because tax rate's in 4 digits.
That's the fire.
That's the fire piece. Then the EMS would be .0263.
Question, Mr. Yates, was that fire last year .67?
That's correct.
So we're reducing it?
Because you had a freeze, so the change in value in the VFD funding due to the freeze is about $400,000 from the one-time capital pieces.
And yeah, you had one-time capital pieces that when we froze the budgets, we did not give them money for their one-time expenditures because those were not ongoing.
Okay. So, Commissioner Simpson, if you'd repeat your motion, please.
Are we amending the budget adoption?
In order to affect what Commissioner Jerry Simpson has, the motion he has made, yes, you would have to amend the budget ordinance to reflect the tax rates that Mr. Yates has provided you.
And how difficult is that?
You say it, you get 3 votes, it happens.
So are you, or is the motion has to be to amend the budget ordinance? Is that the case, or?
Yes, sir. It is an amendment to the budget ordinance as presented. It is not, the total remains the same. You're just breaking it out, but it is an amendment to the ordinance.
So I'll make that motion.
I would ask if, at the commission's pleasure, to give us just a little leeway in those, if we get to the desk tomorrow and verify that number, that there may be a little bit of play in it. I think that's the number, but in the absence of somebody double check my work on that. It's gonna be 311 in total. The split of that may change slightly.
So making the split is what the motion is, and it will fall out.
However it falls out. Because you already have the expenditure side, so we know that, we just have to back in. But I would like a little bit of leeway to have somebody verify my calculation, because I have an opinion on how we do things on the fly, so.
But it won't change the .0311.
No.
Okay, any further discussion?
The only issue I have with breaking it out again is there's been some discussion that because of that rate, based on the ad valorem value, that's the amount of money that's allocated. My understanding, and I want to make sure that it's on the record, that rate is based on the current budget amount. If we collect an additional amount, it's not extra money that's available. It's still within the budget amount, but it's based on what our current collection rates are. So if we're over 100,000 in collection rates, we would apply that to possibly an urgent need or future funding, but it's not available balance that can be used as an excess.
You would appropriate to the volunteer fire departments what you have approved budgetarily. If we collect additional dollars, then those would have to be set aside for the purposes of volunteer fire departments, but you could appropriate them in a subsequent year, which is how we handle fund balance at the present time.
But it's not a guaranteed rate.
No, but it has to be, you would have to spend it for that particular purpose.
I understand that. There's been some confusion, and that's why I want to make sure that I'm clear with it as well. This rate is based on the current budget or the funds that they're asking for. If we collect more ad valorem taxes, it does not mean that that particular budget gets additional funding. It's based on need and need only.
And that's how it's set up in your budget ordinance.
Correct. Thank you.
It's written that way.
Other comments? All in favor of amending the budget as Commissioner Jerry Simpson's amendment? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Any further comments? Discussion? Ms. Coto?
Just a very brief comment. First, thank you to the board. I know this has not been an easy process for you, nor was it an easy decision this evening, but as I believe those of you who have worked with myself as well as staff understand that we minimize the impact as much as possible. We definitely did not go to the revenue neutral rate. We went to something less than revenue neutral because we understood that it was our responsibility to provide services at the least cost possible. I would like to acknowledge Mr. Yates and his department, especially his budget section, who has spent untold hours putting this budget together. I also would like to thank all the department directors, division directors, and their staff for what was not an easy process for them as well as going through this budget. So thank you very much, and I wish you all a good evening.
Commissioner Jerry Simpson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just ditto what Ms. Cotto said in terms of the staff and all the hard work that they've done in preparing the budget. I want to say to Commissioner Simpson, my asking you if you were the liaison was not an attempt to embarrass you to say that you'd not performed your job, but to bring out the point that was made about our inability to communicate with the school board, and this process should have been started long ago, and so that we all have answers to all our questions. I believe Mr. Aikman said he'd like to have the opportunity to sit down and meet with them, and I as well, and I think that would be important as we move in the future. My interest in the transparency on the budget is, I think as we've passed this budget, that we have a process that is much more transparent than it has been in many years. And I think the general public is much more educated in terms with our bifurcated and trifurcated and all those fricated processes that we have are much more educated in terms of how the budget process works. And I was trying to make a point with the slide, although it may be out of date at this point, but about the trajectory and to ditto what Mr. Simpson, Commissioner Simpson said with regard to we better look at that trajectory, because I saw 7 pennies in the next 6 years if we just continue down that road of, as Mr. Simpson said, simply taking all our money and spending it. So we need to work diligently to, on both sides of the, or whatever the aisle be, whether it be the volunteer fire department aisle or the school board aisle or the commissioner aisle, to use that zero-based concept to look at all our, to what our needs, true needs are, and to fund for those. And I believe if we do that, the taxpayers will be satisfied with our job, regardless of what that tax rate or tax amount may be. So I thank you and wish everyone a good evening.
Commissioner Aikman?
I just wish everybody a happy 4th of July. Be safe this weekend, and traveling outside of the county, be safe. And we'll welcome you back home to Sweet Union when you return. With that, I wish everyone a good evening.
Commissioner Lance Simpson?
I agree that the role of government is safety and security. I think it's important. And while I couldn't support the budget tonight, I do believe that we, as a government, need to take care of our citizens. I always think that the other thing we need to do is kind of look and see how we can save, how we can continue to look at what our needs are rather than what our revenue is. I think that's a fault in government. We see that across the board in all levels of government, where we look, if we don't spend it, it's going to go away. And while I don't fault the county for this year, I know they did a zero-based budgeting, and I congratulate them on what they did. I always think there's room to improve. If we continue to go back to the well, at some point the well is going to be empty. And I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers, and I don't think that's fair to anyone. And over the years, we see the taxes rise. If it's being spent fairly and it's being spent wisely, then it's tough to argue. But I always think that we need to look and we need to continue to see what else we can do, where we can save. I think that's just what we need to do to protect our taxpayers. So with that, I'll echo Commissioner Akins' sentiments. Wish everybody a happy 4th of July and a very good evening.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, for the media, I want to help you write your headline for tomorrow. Majority of Union County citizens get a tax cut. Okay? Y'all work with me on that, all right? Again, this has been such a different process from years ago when we, like I said, growth rates were huge, money coming in. We looked hard to find a way to spend it all. We gave money to the schools that they didn't even ask for back then. It was, I remember, like $25 million for land banking, I believe, that they didn't even ask for. I can say honestly that this group of gentlemen that I've worked with through this process have been wonderful, professional. They've came with ideas. Through this process, we've had tragedy. We've had we've had a lot of things happen. We've had a lot of people come up asking for things that we couldn't do. We've had people, the library ladies that came in time after time and needing us to do stuff for them. And, when we talked to the schools as liaison, we told them that, it's not just the schools. We do have other things in the county, fire protection, EMS. We have the libraries. We have all these needs. And while we have a great education system in Union County and want to continue that, we do need to communicate with the school board on a regular basis. It's our duty as elected officials to do this. It's set out that we meet, and I think we should meet at least quarterly as both boards and hash these things out. And I realize there's been bad blood, but that's not anything that we can't fix. Whether it's on our board, we don't always agree, but I can say that every time I call, I don't get an angry voice on the other end of the line when I talk to any of these county commissioners. So again, thank you guys for being professional. Thank the staff. I think you have, I think you've put a sustainable budget that we can stand behind if we have to. And again, wish everyone a happy 4th and hope to continue working this year to keep taxes low so we can maybe cut taxes next year.
All right, I agree very much with Commissioner Rushing's assessment. We have, it's been a very long process, 12 meetings, I think you said. Staff has been great to work with. My peers up here on the board have been exemplary. We've had the disagreements that I think have benefited the county long term, and I think it can help us move forward. I am very pleased that we're giving some support to our deputies, that we kept our promise, and that's very important to us. I'll also say that in the schools, we didn't get to sit down formally. I did have the opportunity to meet with the chairman of the school board numerous times. It was always very pleasant. We agreed sometime to disagree. But I enjoyed very much and look forward to continuing that dialogue with the schools, because I think we put forth a budget that covered the schools that was very well thought out, and so I look forward to working with them in the future. Again, everyone, I hope you have a very happy 4th, and we're going to take a little break, and we won't come back until July the 20th. And so we'll look forward to seeing you then. With that, I'll say good evening. All to adjourn?
Aye.